I want you to move from overwhelmed by information to confident in what really matters. I want to help you move from being unsure towards direction and purpose in your healthcare. I want to introduce you to health experts. I want to let you in on tough conversations on women's health. I want to give you a place where you can lean in and learn how to take care of yourself. Let's transform your health. Let's get clear on your goals. This is Women's Health Unplugged. I'm your host, Dr. Jordan Robertson, Naturopathic Doctor. This week's episode of Women's Health Unplugged is sponsored by our women's health program, The Wild Collective. At our clinic in Burlington, Ontario, we offer two ways to connect with our women's health community program and health education, where you can join us either in person or online for a series of learning, community connection, and facilitated content with our naturopathic doctors to help you pursue your health goals. If you have health goals for this fall, I encourage you to look at our program. We help women transform their health by helping them create and execute on all of their health goals while teaching them everything they need to know about their bodies, their hormones, and their health. Click the link in today's show notes to learn more, as spaces are limited and we only accept 20 women for our online program and 10 women for our VIP in-person experience. This course is going to transform the way you think about your health and help you get the support and connection and community you need to actually achieve your goals. This is our 100th episode of Women's Health Unplugged, and it's quite a monumental moment, actually. And I wanted to, celebrate today by talking a little bit about what I've learned over the last 100 episodes. I wanted to talk a little bit about what you've learned over the last 100 episodes and share a little bit about what's next for us, what my goals are for us over the coming years as we spend this time together every week. Women's Health Unplugged podcast actually didn't start this way. It actually started with me wanting to do a podcast that was about research in integrative medicine. It started with me wanting to break down some myths that I saw consistently in my work. I wanted to, try and bridge this connection between the science, which is sometimes completely inaccessible to the average person, partly because you can't access all scientific literature. And at the time I was teaching and I had great access to scientific literature. And partly because, reading scientific literature is kind of like in a different language. And I had that skill and I have reasonably good communication skills. So I wanted to be that bridge that, took what we were learning in the literature and sharing it with the average person so that they could see the influence that integrative care could have in their healthcare. And man, have we evolved since then. So we published a couple of episodes under that framework. I was struggling to figure out who we were talking to, whether we were talking to people in general, whether we were talking to clinicians, and really didn't have the kind of momentum that I needed to, build the resource and even the audience that we have worked so hard to cultivate now over the last 18 months. So in January, actually, no, it was March 2020, one of my mentors, said something to me that was so powerful. She was like, what's your most powerful medium, Jordan? Like when you're sharing information with other people, what is the most powerful way that you do that? What is the easiest way for you to communicate how you feel about something? Where is your comfort? Where is your strength? And it was so easy for me to answer that question. I was like, oh, it's talking, right? I put me in front of 1,000 people and I'm totally happy to have hard conversations or to say, I don't know something or to break down a problem. I can talk, no problem. That is the best medium for me to be sharing. And then she was like,
So why isn't that the primary way that you connect with people? And at that time, I had the podcast. I had a few other ways of trying to connect and build an audience. And I was like, that is a really good question. I have this podcast that I'm almost afraid to publish on because I, wanted things to be perfect. I wanted there to be no cats meowing in the background. And I wanted the topic to be so important that I was actually publishing less often because I didn't know what we needed to hear, right? I didn't know what to focus on for us. And I made a commitment at that time, which funnily was like right at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, to start publishing weekly, to get support on video, on editing, and to actually work hard on the podcast. And that's kind of where it started. And I started reaching out to guests. And it's funny that my very first guest that we had on this revamped version of the podcast is someone that I had like a total like woman crush on, and that I felt was totally out of my league. Is Dr. Stacy Sims. And I was like, well, if I'm going to have a hardcore badass podcast, I guess I'm going to have to reach out to hardcore badass guests. And I sent her a message on Instagram and asked her if she'd be on my podcast. And she was like, sure. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I have a cool podcast now. And she was our first guest of that revamped version of the podcast back in March of 2020. And we've published weekly since then. And I've hosted some amazing guests that I feel like I would never have had the opportunity to work with if we didn't have this platform for people, and mostly women researchers and clinicians, to share their voice. And for that, I'm like completely grateful. But before we dive in to talk about what you've learned on the podcast, I want to share a little bit about what I've learned by doing the podcast. I mean, first of all, I think I've just learned perseverance. It's funny, I was thinking as I was preparing my notes for today's episode, it's like podcasting is like when someone says that you look nice or you look pretty and you didn't sleep, your hair is greasy, you feel bloated and exhausted, and you're about to burst into tears. And we've all had that moment, right? Like where you literally like feel terrible and someone's like, "Oh my God, did you get your hair done? You look amazing." This is my experience with podcasting. So to break that down a little bit, like it's so interesting to me that, sometimes the work that you see behind the scenes is not, or you don't see the work that's behind the scenes. And so although we've slung together, episodes for many, many weeks in a row, there certainly have been moments where I have personally not felt particularly connected to my message, where I wasn't sure if what I was saying was even helpful, if the topic that I thought was important, that anybody else thought was important. I've definitely had those moments where I was like, yep, you know what? I'm just going to talk about what I eat for breakfast. Let's just start there. I'll do a podcast on breakfast and what I eat for breakfast. And I, didn't feel particularly good recording that episode. I was like, this is lame. And it literally is our top performing podcast in the last year, is what I ate for breakfast. And so many people have listened to that episode. And it's like that exact feeling of like, I'm bloated and tired and my eyes are puffy and my hair is greasy and everybody thinks I look amazing. That's one of my sort of lessons about the podcast. And what I mean by all of that, and my metaphor analogy there, is that first of all, you just have to keep showing up, right? Like I probably am better at interviewing, better at podcasting now than I was the first day that I hit record, all those years ago, because it was a couple years ago when I initially started. I understand myself way better, and what my message is and what I want for you and what I want for us. I understand that so much better. But putting down the mic or not hitting record in any of those weeks wasn't going to get me clarity. It wasn't going to get me closer to understanding myself and understanding our mission and all of those things. So in all of those moments when I didn't know what I was doing, when I didn't see the bigger picture, when I, you know, wasn't sure how an episode was going to land, but showed up anyways. Those sometimes were the best performing episodes, first of all. And second of all, even if I didn't feel good and I didn't feel connected to, or I didn't know if you were going to connect to the topic, you connected to the topic just as well as any other topic, just as well as ones where I was like, this one's the best. And there's so many examples of that in our pursuit of health, right? And so it's not different. It's no different than you picking up your dumbbells when you don't feel like it. It's no different than you asking hard questions when you didn't get a great sleep. It's no different than you showing up every day for yourself, for your nutrition, for your kids, for your partner, and just showing up, because we're less in control of like the outcome of all of those showing upness than we think. And it's the showing up that it's like the hours on the job that actually creates the progress. It's the hours on the job that gets us closer to that finish line, whatever that is, versus doing things perfectly right out of the gate. And I've been pretty open in all my work that I am not a perfectionist, but podcasting was like even pressure on that, right? Like even for a non-perfectionist, podcasting was, putting some pressure on my ability to just show up. And it's been such a cool example of how the practice of doing something, and even if you're not doing it perfectly, even if you don't think it's perfect, someone else probably needs it, right? Someone else needs you to show up even when you don't feel perfect. Someone else needs you to contribute even if your thoughts are not perfectly formed. And that's one of the things that I've learned from podcasting, is that there are so many ways that we can connect. There's so many topics we can talk about. It's the practice of us showing up for each other every single week that's actually going to move us forward. And we're not as in control of the outcome, right? That breakfast episode's such a perfect example. Like, my support team was like, do an episode on what you eat for breakfast. And I'm like, boring. This is not exciting. This is not something anyone wants to know. And yet, right, it was like the most connected with episode that we've done in the last year. And so, you're not as in control of the outcome. And so whatever your goal is, right, if it's, improving your nutrition or improving your exercise, the thing that you're actually in control of is just showing up. You're not in control of how fast you get there. You're not in control of how strong you are when you cross the finish line. You're in control of the practice of the thing. And that's what I have found. That's my greatest lesson, actually, in the first 100 episodes of the podcast, is that I'm not as in control of the outcome as I want. An episode that I thought was just going to be banner, which was the top 3 episodes or top 3 questions you need to ask yourself before you buy any supplements, did not perform as well as I expected it to. And it's, so it just goes to show you, like, breakfast and that one were released like kind of in the same quarter, and breakfast killed supplements. And even though I was maybe more emotionally attached to the supplement episode. So it just goes to show you that, like, we can't always control the outcome, but what we can control is our ability to show up for the practice of what we're doing, and that perseverance and commitment to you and to myself and to the audience and to the purpose and all of that. I think that's been my kind of greatest lesson, because to publish 52 episodes a year over the last year and a half, then we have our previous episodes. That's how we're at 100. That's the math on that. Is a huge commitment, and I'm quite proud of it, actually, that we've been able to navigate the last 18 months. And it's been an important 18 months to keep showing up for each other. So those are my lessons as I move forward. And I hope that that's something that you can translate into your own thoughts about your practices in your life. Now, speaking about the things that you've learned in the last 100 episodes, I mean, I scrolled back through our titles over the last 100 episodes, and I just was like amazed at and reminded of all of the amazing guests that we have had on the podcast over the last 100 episodes. I've had the chance to talk to Dr. Stacey Sims, like I said, who that is our most downloaded episode of all time, actually. And, Dr. Laura Bryden, who is a naturopathic doctor. So let me back up. Stacey Sims and I talked about the challenges that happen when women underfuel. So we talked about energy availability for women and why eating enough is so important for hormones and to maintain a regular menstrual cycle, whether you're an athlete or not. And that was such an important conversation and topic for me because so many women approach me in my one-on-one clinical practice having hormone imbalances, which I'm saying in air quotes, without realizing that their dieting or their over-exercising is having a negative influence on their cycle. And that episode really kicked us off to uncovering some of the challenges in diet culture, which, since then I've had, so many guests where we've focused on the challenges with diet culture and looking at things like intuitive eating and supporting nutrition in women in a fueling perspective versus in a shrinking perspective, which is so much of the conversation online about nutrition for women. I got the chance to talk to Dr. Laura Bryden, who's a naturopathic doctor in New Zealand. And we talked about, the oral contraceptive pill and some of the myths that are still pervasive in, what women understand about the impact that the pill has on their menstrual cycle. We had an amazing episode with Dr. Matthew Leonardi, who is one of the obstetrician gynecologists at the endometriosis clinic in Hamilton, Ontario, which I actually have a clinical relationship with and that I am their off-site naturopathic doctor. We talked about, getting to the root of a diagnosis of an endometriosis diagnosis and some of the barriers that women face to getting their menstrual cramps properly assessed. I've had the chance to talk to Nicole Jardim, which she is such a force online with normalizing the conversation about periods. She has written an amazing book about fixing your period. And we talked a lot about, again, and you can see the themes now, right? Like the things that are normalized in women's health that are actually, I'm going to use the word pathology loosely, but the things in women's health that we normalize that are not normal, the things in women's health that are getting in the way of you being able to show up every day for yourself, for your family, and for the world. And when I think about what our big goals are with the podcast and what my big goals are with women's health in general, it's like we can't feel like garbage half the month or just past 50 years of age. We need you, right? We need you. If we want you to show up consistently with perseverance, like I try to with the podcast, you can't be sidelined by menstrual cramps. You can't have hemorrhaging menstrual cycles that mean that you sleep on towels or sleep in a recliner or, don't sleep at all. You can't have your mood tank after 40 and have nobody help you understand why that is. I need it to be different so that you can show up in your life, in the world, at your job, the way that you were meant to. If we're going to have women rise, you need to feel better. And we need to stop normalizing what's going on, specifically with women's health. And that's when I look at some of those best performing episodes. If I look at some of those most important episodes, we've been talking about this theme exactly, talking about super mom syndrome and burnout and talking about even the small, like subtle changes that you can make for yourself that will have a profound impact on your health. So I did one episode on step counting, and we talked about the impact that an additional 1,000 steps has per day on your long-term health and cardiovascular risk of death from cardiovascular disease. And so the other side of my goals, not only to just showcase amazing guests and stop normalizing so many challenges in women's health, but also to make health change accessible for you, to make it feel like something that's within your reach. So often the online messaging that we get about health is that it's at this like destination, right? That like one day you'll make it to this beautiful tropical island where you're healthy, but until then, enjoy your breakfast sandwich. That is not health, right? That's not what happens. Health is a continuum. Your health has seasons, right? Your health has phases. There's going to be times in your life where you need to focus on something. There's going to be times in your life where you can't focus on anything because maybe there's other stuff going on for you and you need to just rely on, what you've got and persevere through a difficult time to only come back and revisit your health in a different way at another time. It's not this like fantastical, is that a word? It's not this fantastic destination. And I think when we make it so dichotomous, like, yes, no, destination, you made it. No, you're not there yet. It's disempowering because it continuously reinforces this message that you are not enough. You are not your healthiest yet. Whereas all you need to do is to be one step further than you were last week or last month or last year. Or maybe you consciously put your health down for 4 weeks while your child is ill. Or maybe you consciously have to back burner some of your habits. The habits episode with Dr. Emily Bennett, by the way, is one of my favorite episodes, and it's one of your favorite episodes too. Maybe you need to back burner one of your habits for a short period of time only to pick it all back up again. But when we're so dichotomous about it, you're healthy, you're not, we hang out in the you're not camp far too long. It prevents us from picking our habits back up because we start to feel like it's not worth it, right? If you're not going to do it perfectly, then why bother? And so often when women sit down in my office, they say, oh, I'm black or white. I'm in or I'm not. And I will say, no. Like, I need you to challenge that from right now on. That is not how you are. That's just what you've been told. That's just the messaging that you get about what health is that it is or it isn't. Today, that changes. Today, we're willing to take an extra 1,000 steps and make your own lunch, and that be it. Tomorrow, we're willing to buy lunch at a food court and go to the gym, right? We have to stop this all or nothing mentality. It's actually holding us back, and it's giving power to an industry that is preying on your insecurities. I really like what I just said there. It's giving power to an industry that's preying on your insecurities. So what's next for us, right? What are the next 100 episodes going to look like for Women's Health Unplugged? And when I chose the title or the name, the idea for me is that this was going to be intimate, right? When I think about Unplugged, right, I always think I was born in the 80s. I always think of like my dad listening to Eric Clapton Unplugged. It's intimate, right? It's close. It's quiet but important conversation, like an acoustic guitar. That's one of the things I think of when I think of the word unplugged. The other thing I think of is that it's like we're unveiling or uncovering or ripping the Band-Aid off and exposing conversations in this topic, in women's health and in just people's health in general. That's what my big vision of Women's Health Unplugged was when we started. It was like, we're going to have good conversations. We're going to show up for each other consistently. We're going to, address lots of areas in women's health and in health in general. And we're going to change the way you think about your healthcare so that you feel more empowered, that you feel more knowledgeable, and that you feel more confident about the healthcare choices that you are making and the health choices that you are making for yourself. Those were my goals. And I had to listen back to the intro, which I don't often listen to, actually, truth be told, because we are working on a new project for me that's going to give us more reach, more ways to connect with you, including a bigger platform for Women's Health Unplugged. And as we started to work on that project, which it will be unveiled soon, it's not going to be ready in time for this episode, I had to listen back to the intro of the podcast. And you know what? Everything I said there, all of those episodes ago, is still true. I want to have important conversations about your health. I want you to feel confident in what really matters. When I think about the conversations that I want to have with you going forward, I want to have conversations with big players in the industry, but I also want to have conversations with people that you probably have never heard of, but yet are shaking the way that we understand healthcare, the way that we understand hormonal health and women's health. Those are my goals for some of the people I want to have conversations with. I want to have conversations with people that are in the trenches talking about women's health and give them the voice and platform that they need to spread their message. I also want to expose you to cool people in the industry who I think we need to be leaning on to help lead us through this revolution in women's health. I also want this to continue to be a place where I can share my insights with you. And it's funny, when I had to do the first sort of off-the-cuff episode about what I think about something, I mean, my whole background is in research and critical appraisal, where that's not my opinion, right? That's not my opinion. It's it's what we know as scientific fact. And with my excellent communication skills, I'm going to distill down what we've learned in that research, and I'm going to share it with you so that it is something that is accessible for you. So when I sit down to do an episode like what should you eat for breakfast, or, how to create a morning routine, that was a very vulnerable experience for me as a researcher, because I'm like, first of all, does anyone really care what I think about this? Which turns out you do, because these are some of our most downloaded episodes. My morning routine is one of the most downloaded episodes. But also, I now realize that I can lean on my experience. I was a very young grad as a naturopathic doctor. I fast-tracked through school and was a very young practitioner when I graduated. I was only 27. I was 29 when I was 27. When I graduated from naturopathic college, which was I was the youngest in my class by far. And that label really stuck with me, especially as I started to work in women's health, because I was working with these amazing, experienced, wise women. And I felt like I was I could be their baby, right? And that was challenging for me at the beginning of my career. I'm almost 15 years in, not quite, but close, and have treated tens of thousands of women with the conditions that we talk about. I've had thousands and thousands and thousands of conversations about strategy, habit building, sustainable change, the psychology related to how you relate to your body and your health, the health habits that make the biggest difference, how to continue when you've been beaten down, how to pick yourself back up, how to know what's important, how to navigate the healthcare system. And I need to lean on that a little bit better, because those kinds of conversations, I think, are what you're really showing up for. We're going to sprinkle in the research, of course. I can never leave the research behind, but I want to bring to you more of my expertise and more of my experience so that we can draw on the thousands of women that I've worked with in order to help you feel connected to a greater community of people who are all pursuing the same journey that you are. And that's, I think, my greatest message for you and my greatest purpose for us moving forward through these next 100 episodes is that you are not alone. Everyone's story is very similar to yours. I mean, really, I just made my story about the podcast a metaphor of your health, and it's completely accurate. This is a place where you can come to hear those stories, to hear that experience, to hear those experts, and for us to continue to challenge the status quo in women's healthcare, because that's how we're going to move the needle forward, is by you feeling your best and showing up for yourselves and for your family and for your community every day, feeling your best. So that's what we're going to do over the next 100 episodes. I want you to lean in. I'm going to lean in. I want you to feel more confident about your health. Thanks for being here for the last 100 episodes. Go back and listen to some of those amazing topics that we have addressed over the last year and a half. And I will see you for the next 100. Thanks for being here.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Women's Health Unplugged. My goal is to help you feel more confident about your health. Please remember that what we talked about today in the podcast does not constitute medical advice, nor was a doctor-patient relationship formed. If you have questions about your healthcare or about how today's topic pertains to you, please take it up with your family doctor, your specialist, or someone on your health team.